Have you ever woken up one morning and felt that something in your life had quietly slipped away while you were asleep, like the air had changed and nobody warned you? Because that's exactly how this began, and even now, Sai, I still remember that morning so clearly it almost hurts. For 42 years I believed my marriage was steady, not perfect. No marriage ever is, hahaha, but steady enough that I never imagined waking up alone would become my reality. My husband and I had routines that felt permanent: morning coffee at 7, evening television, small arguments about nothing, the comfort of knowing someone was always in the next room. We raised children, buried parents, survived money problems, health scares, and every ordinary storm couples face when they grow old together. Life was predictable, and honestly, I liked predictable. But 3 months before everything fell apart, things began changing in small ways I chose not to question. He suddenly joined a gym. At his age, I even laughed about it to my friends. He bought new shoes, started caring about his hair again, bought cologne that smelled nothing like the man I'd known for decades. "Doctor says I need exercise," he told me, and I believed him. Why wouldn't I? Then came the new clothes: tighter jeans, stylish shirts. I teased him, told him he was trying to impress someone, and he laughed it off. Looking back now, I should have listened to that tiny voice inside me. Then came the phone calls. He'd step outside to talk, saying it was just friends from golf, but his voice would drop low, and conversations stopped the moment I walked near him. I noticed, but I didn't want to become that suspicious wife who questions everything. Trust felt easier than conflict until that Tuesday morning. I woke up around 6:30, reached for his side of the bed, and it was cold, empty. At first I thought he'd gone to make coffee, so I walked to the kitchen still half asleep, expecting to smell it brewing. Nothing, silence. The house felt strange, too quiet. I checked the living room, bathroom, even the backyard, no sign of him. Then I went to the garage, and that's when my stomach dropped. His truck was there, but my car, my silver Lexus I bought after selling my mother's estate, was gone, just an empty space on the floor where it should have been. I stood there staring, my mind trying to catch up with reality. Maybe he went for an early errand, maybe something urgent happened. I called his phone, straight to voicemail, called again, same thing. I texted him, asking where he was and why he took my car, no reply. Minutes passed, maybe longer. I don't even remember. Fear slowly turned into confusion, and confusion into something colder. I went back inside and checked the bedroom again, and that's when I noticed his wedding ring on the nightstand. He never forgot that ring, ever. He had taken it off on purpose. My hands started shaking. This wasn't an emergency. This was planned. I called our son, then stopped myself. What would I even say? That his father vanished in the night with my car. I sat at the kitchen table staring at my phone, waiting for it to ring with some reasonable explanation that would make me feel silly for worrying. But the call never came. Hours passed, then a full day, then another, still nothing. Friends hadn't heard from him, family didn't know anything. It felt like he'd erased himself. On the third day, I opened our bank account, hoping to see some clue, and that's when my breath caught in my throat. An $80,000 deposit sat there, recent and fresh, exactly what my car was worth. My husband hadn't just taken my car, he had sold it. Ha ha ha, I actually laughed when I realized it, not because it was funny, but because shock sometimes comes out in strange ways. I didn't cry, tears never came. Instead, I felt numb, like my heart had frozen. After 42 years together, he didn't even leave a note, just took the car, sold it, and disappeared. And sitting there alone in that quiet kitchen, I realized something even worse. The man I trusted more than anyone had been planning this for months while I slept peacefully beside him every night. But what hurt most wasn't just the stolen car or the money. It was the realization that somewhere, somehow, my husband had decided his new life didn't include me anymore, and the question that kept echoing in my mind was this: if he planned everything so carefully, what else was he hiding from me? And little did I know, the answer was about to change everything. You'd think after discovering your husband vanished with your car, the worst part would already be over, right? That nothing else could surprise you anymore, but sometimes the real shock comes slowly, piece by piece, until the truth hits harder than the first blow ever did, and those next 3 days felt exactly like that: slow, confusing, painfully quiet. I kept telling myself there had to be some explanation. Maybe he panicked about something, maybe he needed space, maybe he'd call and say sorry and we'd laugh later about how dramatic it all felt. But every hour that passed without a message made that hope weaker. I called his friends, his brother, even old neighbors. Nobody had heard from him. My children kept asking questions I didn't have answers for. And the silence in the house, sigh, it was unbearable. Every sound reminded me he wasn't there. No footsteps, no TV noise, no coughing in the morning, nothing. Just me walking around rooms that suddenly felt too big. On the third morning, still tired from barely sleeping, I decided to check our bank account again, hoping maybe he used his card somewhere and I'd know where he went. Instead, what I saw made my stomach twist. There it was, an $80,000 deposit, fresh, clean, sitting in the account like it belonged there, and suddenly everything made sense in the worst possible way. That was exactly what my car was worth. My husband hadn't borrowed the car. He'd sold it, sold my car, forged whatever signature he needed, took the money, and vanished. I just sat there staring at the screen, rereading the numbers like maybe they would change. But they didn't, and strangely, I still didn't cry. People expect tears in moments like this, weeping, shouting, drama. Instead, I felt cold, calm in a scary way, like my heart had decided emotions were useless right now. I started thinking logically instead. Why deposit the money into our joint account? Why not just run away with it? That meant something. Either he planned to move the money later or he thought depositing it would make things look normal. My mind replayed the past months. The gym membership, the new clothes, the secret phone calls, weekend trips that suddenly happened more often, ATM withdrawals in cities we never visited, Phoenix, Tucson, places he had no reason to be. And suddenly the picture became clear, so painfully clear I almost laughed again. There was someone else. Of course there was. Men don't reinvent themselves at 68 just for fun. Someone had made him feel young again, important again, alive again, and I, after 4 decades together, had become invisible to him. Ha ha ha, funny how life works, right? You spend years building something with someone and one day they wake up wanting a different story. I grabbed a notebook and started writing everything down, trying to organize my thoughts. Missing husband, sold car, secret money movements. Phone calls, new behavior, lies stacked on lies, and then the big question hit me: what should I do next? Everyone always says call the police, report theft, file charges, let the law handle it, and for a moment I almost did. My finger hovered over my phone, but then another thought stopped me. Prison at his age would probably kill him. Did I want revenge that badly? Did I want to become the woman who destroyed the father of her children? I didn't know. All I knew was I needed answers first. I needed truth before punishment, and that's when something clicked in my mind. A small memory from months earlier, something so ordinary I hadn't thought about it since. My car. The attempted theft at the mall parking lot, the police officer suggesting I install a GPS tracker just in case. I remembered paying for it, setting up the app, then completely forgetting about it. My hands actually trembled as I opened my laptop again and logged into the tracker account, half expecting it not to work anymore. But when the map loaded, there it was, a blinking dot, my car, still active. Still transmitting location. My heart started pounding as I zoomed in closer, watching the streets appear, the neighborhood forming on the screen, and then the city name showed up. Las Vegas, of course. Where else would a man running away go? The city where people go to become someone new, pretend their old life never existed. I leaned back in my chair, staring at that tiny blue dot on the map, and for the first time since all this began, a strange sense of control washed over me. He thought he'd disappeared, he thought he'd outsmarted me, but I knew exactly where he was, and he had no idea I was watching. And in that moment, instead of dialing the police, instead of screaming or crying, I did something he would never expect. I decided to stay silent and plan. Because sometimes the strongest move isn't chasing the person who betrayed you, it's waiting until they walk straight back into your life on their own. And what I didn't know yet was that this silent decision was about to pull me into something far bigger than a stolen car, because just as I closed the laptop, my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number, and the words on the screen made my blood run cold. When your phone buzzes at the exact moment you think you finally understand what's happening, your heart does this strange thing where it both freezes and races at the same time. And that's exactly what happened to me as I stared at the message from an unknown number, my hands suddenly cold even though the room was warm. The text was short, just one line: I know you're tracking the car. For a few seconds I honestly couldn't breathe, my mind started spinning. How could he know? I never told him about the GPS tracker. It was installed quietly after that attempted theft months ago, and it never felt important enough to mention. Yet somehow he knew. Before I could even process it, another message came through: we need to talk tomorrow. Don't do anything stupid. And just like that, the fear turned into something else: anger. Ha ha ha, imagine stealing your wife's car, disappearing with it, and then warning her not to do anything stupid. The nerve. I typed back slowly, forcing my shaking fingers to stay steady. You sold my car and vanished. There's nothing to talk about. His reply came instantly, like he'd been waiting. It's not what you think. Meet me tomorrow, 2 p.m. Starbucks on Sahara Avenue. Come alone. Come alone. That part made my stomach twist. Suddenly this didn't feel like a confused husband trying to explain himself. It felt like someone trying to control the situation before losing it. I put the phone down and just sat there, staring at nothing, sighing quietly as the weight of it all pressed on my chest. He knew I was tracking the car, which meant either he found the tracker or someone told him. Maybe the mechanic noticed something. Maybe he searched the car himself. It didn't matter. What mattered was that he now knew I was aware he was in Las Vegas, and he was trying to make the next move. but here's the thing, after 42 years with someone, you learn their habits, you learn how they think. And I knew exactly what he was doing. He thought I'd panic. He thought I'd rush to meet him, emotional, confused, ready to forgive or at least listen. He expected tears, maybe even begging. But something inside me had changed over those silent days. Instead of reacting, I started thinking. If he was hiding with someone, if he had lied and planned this for months, then one conversation at a coffee shop wouldn't fix anything. I needed to see the truth myself, not excuses, not stories, truth, so instead of replying again, I texted my daughter. Change of plans, your father knows I tracked the car. He wants to meet tomorrow in Vegas. Her answer came instantly. Absolutely not, sounds dangerous. I smiled sadly because she was right, but I also knew something she didn't yet. I'm still going, I wrote back, but not to meet him. I'm going to where the car actually is. Silence for a moment then, I'm coming with you. A few minutes later my son called, worried, confused, protective. They both wanted answers too, and suddenly this wasn't just about me anymore. It was about our whole family realizing the man we trusted wasn't who we thought he was. That night, sleep barely came. Every time I closed my eyes, I pictured him laughing somewhere in Vegas, living a new life while I sat alone in a quiet house. Part of me wanted to scream, part of me wanted to cry, but mostly I just felt tired. Exhausted by betrayal, around midnight I checked the tracker again. The car hadn't moved, same address, same neighborhood. Whoever he was with, he felt comfortable enough to stay put. That told me something important. He didn't expect consequences yet, and honestly, that made me feel strangely calm, because surprises work best when the other person doesn't know they're coming. Early the next morning, before sunrise, my kids arrived. Coffee cups in hand, worried looks on their faces. The drive ahead of us felt heavy before we even started. Bags packed, phones charged, GPS ready. As we pulled away from the house, my daughter looked back at me through the mirror and asked softly, "Mom, what are you going to do when you see him?" And I realized I didn't actually know yet. Anger, sadness, humiliation, all mixed together. But one thing was certain, I wasn't going there to fight, I was going there to understand. To see the truth with my own eyes so there would be no more lies, no more confusion, no more wondering. Sometimes clarity hurts, but living in doubt hurts more. The highway stretched ahead of us as desert sunlight slowly filled the sky, and during that 5-hour drive, my children argued quietly about whether we should involve police, whether confronting him was safe, whether I was thinking clearly. Maybe I wasn't, maybe heartbreak makes you do strange things, but turning back wasn't an option anymore. Because somewhere in Las Vegas, my husband was living a secret life he thought I'd never discover. And as the miles passed beneath us, one thought kept repeating in my mind, what if the truth waiting for us there was worse than I imagined? And honestly, nothing could have prepared me for the woman who opened that door when we finally arrived. By the time we reached Las Vegas, the sun was high, the city buzzing like nothing in the world could ever go wrong there, and I remember thinking how strange it was that life kept moving normally for everyone else while mine felt like it had stopped 3 days earlier. My daughter drove slowly through unfamiliar streets while my son watched the GPS on my phone, guiding us turn by turn, and with every mile closer, my chest tightened. The neighborhood we entered wasn't glamorous like the casinos people imagine. It was quiet, ordinary, single-story houses, dusty yards, parked cars baking in the heat, the kind of place where people mind their own business. And then my son said, "That's it." I looked up and there it was, my Lexus sitting in the driveway like nothing unusual had happened. Same car, same scratches, same license plate. Seeing it made my throat tighten. For a second I almost cried, not because I loved the car so much, but because it made everything real. He really had taken it, sold it, and left me behind. Parked next to it was another car, an older red Honda, probably belonging to whoever lived there. We parked across the street, engine still running, all three of us staring at the house in silence. Curtains closed, no visible movement. It looked like any normal home. My daughter broke the silence first. "So, what's the plan?" Honestly, I hadn't planned this part. You imagine confrontations differently in your head. You think you'll feel strong, prepared. But sitting there, my legs suddenly felt weak. Still, I opened the door and stepped out before fear could stop me. My children followed close behind, protective, tense. Each step toward the house felt heavier. I rang the doorbell once. Nothing, rang again. After a moment, the door opened, and standing there was a woman I'd never seen before. Mid-40s maybe, blonde hair, too much makeup, casual clothes. She looked surprised to see 3 strangers at her door. "Can I help you?" she asked carefully. I swallowed and said, "I'm looking for Tom. Tom Brennan, is he here?" Her face changed instantly. Confusion first, then something like panic. Who are you?" she asked. And that's when I said the words that seemed to hit her like a slap. "I'm his wife, and that's my car in your driveway." The color drained from her face so fast it was almost painful to watch. For a second she just stared at me, mouth slightly open like her brain couldn't process what she heard. Then she whispered, "Oh God." My daughter shifted beside me, ready to jump in if needed, but I raised my hand slightly to stop her. I kept my voice calm. "Where is he?" The woman shook her head. "He's not here. He left this morning. I don't know when he'll be back." She hesitated, then sighed shakily. "I'm Denise." Silence hung there for a moment before she continued, words tumbling out quickly, almost like she needed to confess. "We've been seeing each other for 6 months. He told me he was divorced, that his wife passed away 2 years ago." My ears rang. "Passed away." I blinked slowly, trying to process it. She kept talking, tears forming. "He showed me pictures. Said he was selling his house and moving here for a fresh start." I felt something break inside me, not loudly, just quietly. After 42 years together, my husband had told another woman I was dead, dead. "Ha ha ha, if it wasn't so cruel, it would almost be funny," I said flatly. "Well, as you can see, I'm very much alive, and he didn't sell his house, he stole my car." Denise covered her mouth, shaking her head. "I swear I didn't know." My mind snapped to another question. "Where is the money?" She hesitated, then whispered, "He gave me $20,000, said it was a gift for letting him stay while he looked for his own place." 20,000. Just handed away like pocket change. Anger flared, hot and sharp, but before I could say anything else, we heard a familiar engine behind us. My husband's pickup truck turned into the driveway. For a moment, everything froze. He stepped out, looked up, and saw us standing there. Shock hit his face so hard it almost made me laugh. He hadn't expected this, not at all. His expression hardened quickly, though, like he was trying to regain control. "Margaret," he said, walking toward us, "what are you doing here?" My son moved slightly in front of me, protective. And all I could think was how unbelievable it was that the man who disappeared with my car had the nerve to ask me that question. I answered slowly, my voice steady despite my pounding heart. "You steal my car, vanish for days, and you're asking what I'm doing here?" His jaw tightened. "I told you we'd talk later. You don't get to tell me anything anymore," I replied. Denise stood behind him, crying softly, realization crashing down on her. My daughter crossed her arms, eyes burning with anger. And then Tom said something that made the situation turn from shocking to dangerous. His voice dropped cold as he looked at me and said, "You need to leave right now." And in that moment, standing in the hot Nevada sun, with my stolen car behind him and his lies collapsing in front of everyone, I realized this confrontation was about to explode into something none of us were ready for. For a second, standing there in that driveway, I honestly wondered if I was looking at the same man I'd shared a life with for 42 years. Because the way Tom looked at me wasn't embarrassment or guilt, it was anger, like I was the one who'd done something wrong, and that realization hurt more than the stolen car ever could. He stepped closer, trying to sound calm but clearly losing control. "Margaret, you shouldn't have come here," he said, like he was scolding me for breaking some rule. My son instantly stepped in front of me, his voice sharp. "Stay back, Dad." Tom's face twisted with irritation. "This is between me and your mother." My daughter shot back. "You made it our business when you stole from her." Denise was still standing near the doorway, wiping tears, looking between all of us like she'd just discovered the man she trusted was a stranger. Tom glanced at her quickly, then turned back to me. "The car wasn't stolen," he snapped. "It was community property." I almost laughed. "The title is in my name only," I replied calmly. "You forged my signature." Denise gasped softly behind him, clearly learning new information by the second. Tom's temper flared. "She gave permission," he shouted, pointing at me. "We talked about it." That's when I slowly pulled my phone out and held it up. I'd started recording the moment Denise opened the door, just in case. My voice stayed quiet but firm. "Should we play back the conversation where Denise explains how you told her I was dead?" His face drained of color so fast it was almost shocking. For a moment he looked like a cornered animal, eyes darting, searching for escape. "You're recording this?" he asked, stunned. "Every word," I said. Silence hung heavy between us. Denise stared at Tom, realization finally settling in. "Tom, you said she passed away," she whispered. He snapped at her without even looking. "Not now, Denise." Then his attention snapped back to me, anger boiling over. "This is my life," he exploded. "I'm done pretending I'm happy. I'm done being trapped in that house." I felt something cold settle in my chest. "Then you file for divorce," I answered. "Like an adult, you don't steal from me and run away." His fists clenched. "I'll destroy you in court," he hissed. "You'll get nothing." "Ha ha ha," I almost laughed again at the irony. "Try," I replied. My son stepped closer as Tom took a threatening step toward me, but before anything could escalate, Tom pulled out his phone, acting tough. "I'm calling my lawyer," he muttered. "You'll regret this." "Good," I said calmly. "So am I." Denise suddenly broke down, crying. "Tom, you told me she was gone. You said you were free," she sobbed. He ignored her completely, staring at me with pure frustration. For the first time, I saw fear behind his anger. He realized his carefully built story was collapsing, and without another word, we turned and walked back toward our car. My legs felt weak, adrenaline fading, the weight of everything crashing down on me. As we drove away, I looked back once and saw Tom standing frozen in the driveway, phone in his hand, watching us leave while Denise disappeared back inside the house. The drive back felt longer than the trip there. No one talked much. My children kept glancing at me, worried, but I was too exhausted to say anything. The truth hurt, yes, but clarity also brought relief. At least now I knew. At least the lies were out in the open. When we finally reached home late that night and I stepped inside, the silence felt heavier than before. This house wasn't just empty now, it felt haunted by everything that had just happened. I barely slept. Around 3 in the morning, pounding on the front door jolted me awake. My heart slammed against my ribs as I grabbed the baseball bat David left years ago and crept downstairs in the dark. Then I heard his voice. "Margaret, open the door, we need to talk." My stomach twisted. He'd followed me home. I stood behind the door, not opening it. "Go away, Tom," I said through the wood, my voice shaking slightly. "Let me explain," he pleaded, suddenly sounding desperate. "You're not coming inside," I answered. "Talk to my lawyer." He pounded again, frustration boiling over. "This is my house too." That's when I pulled out my phone and dialed 911. "You have 30 seconds to leave," I said calmly. Silence followed. Then I heard him swear, footsteps retreating, his truck engine starting. I canceled the call and locked every door and window, then sat on the couch until sunrise, bat across my lap, realizing something painful but important: the man I loved wasn't just gone. He'd become someone I didn't recognize. And just when I thought maybe things would finally quiet down after that night, my phone started filling with messages from him begging to come back, saying he'd made a mistake, saying Denise meant nothing. But what I didn't know yet was that this emotional storm was only the beginning, because the real battle was about to start, and it wouldn't be fought in driveways or at front doors, but somewhere far more dangerous for him, in court. The strange thing about betrayal is that after the shouting stops and the shock settles, what follows isn't always peace. Sometimes it's noise, constant noise, and the days after Tom showed up at my door begging were exactly like that, my phone buzzing nonstop, messages stacking up, his name appearing over and over until even seeing it made my chest tight. First came apologies, "Margaret, I'm sorry," then excuses, "I felt trapped," then promises, "We can fix this," then anger again, "You're overreacting." It was like watching someone desperately throw every emotion at the wall, hoping something would stick. But something inside me had shifted. I read the messages without replying, then deleted them one by one. Silence became my answer. Then Denise started calling, the same woman who'd opened the door in Las Vegas. I didn't pick up, but she left voicemail after voicemail, crying, saying she didn't know he was married, saying he lied to her too. Part of me almost felt sorry for her. Almost. But sympathy was hard to find when she'd accepted $20,000 without asking where it came from. In the end, we were both used in different ways. Still, I wasn't ready to talk to anyone connected to him. I needed distance. I needed air. My daughter Ellen came over with groceries and food one afternoon, insisting I eat something real instead of just coffee and toast. She unpacked everything while watching me carefully. "You're not answering your phone," she said. I shrugged, taking a break from the world. She nodded slowly. "David's worried." I gave a tired smile. "Tell him I'm functional. That's the best I can promise right now." We ate quietly, and after a while she told me my lawyer had called. Apparently, after hearing what happened in Vegas and listening to the recordings I sent, she was confident we had a strong case, not just for divorce but possibly criminal charges. Theft, fraud, forgery. Words I never imagined would be connected to my husband's name. Ellen squeezed my hand and said something that stayed with me. "Mom, you don't have to decide everything right now. Just take one step at a time." And that's what I started doing, one step. The next morning, for the first time since all this started, I went to my quilting group at church. Sitting there with those women, talking about fabric patterns instead of lawyers and betrayal, felt like breathing again after being underwater too long. Helen squeezed my shoulder and said, "You're stronger than you think." I wasn't sure I believed her yet, but hearing it helped. For a few hours, life felt normal again. But when I returned home that afternoon, taped to my front door was a handwritten letter, Tom's handwriting. My stomach sank even before I read it. He wrote about our 42 years together, about memories, about how couples survive mistakes. He reminded me of times we'd supported each other through hard moments, trying to pull on nostalgia like a rope to drag me back. Then at the bottom, he asked me to meet him, just talk, give him a chance. I read it twice, then slowly tore it into pieces and dropped them into the trash, because suddenly I understood something clearly. He wasn't sorry he hurt me. He was sorry he was facing consequences. Big difference. I texted my lawyer, "He's trying to meet without lawyers. I'm not going. Move forward." Her reply came quickly. "Good, stay strong." I was trying, truly. But strength doesn't feel heroic in moments like this. It feels lonely. And just when I thought maybe Tom would finally understand I was serious, 6 days after Vegas, his truck pulled into my driveway again. This time he wasn't alone. Denise stepped out with him. I stood in my garden holding pruning shears, watching them approach like something unreal unfolding in slow motion. Tom walked toward me with forced confidence. Margaret, we need to talk. I kept my voice calm. You should talk to my lawyer, he sighed dramatically. This is bigger than lawyers. Denise stood beside him, eyes red, clearly uncomfortable. Tom continued, saying things weren't what they looked like, that he'd only borrowed the car money, that Denise needed help with medical bills, that I was controlling about money. Controlling. Ha ha ha, the word almost made me laugh out loud. Denise apologized softly, saying she'd believed he was divorced. I watched them both, suddenly feeling exhausted rather than angry. Finally, Tom said, let's settle this. No criminal charges, simple divorce, split things evenly, you keep the house. He thought he was offering peace. Instead, all I heard was someone trying to escape responsibility cheaply. I shook my head. No, his face darkened instantly, and then he said something that sent real fear down my spine. You think you know where all our money is, you don't. He started talking about accounts in his name, investments I'd never heard of, cash he'd moved quietly over the years. Denise stared at him in shock. I felt the ground shift under me. This wasn't just an affair or a stolen car anymore. He'd been planning his escape financially long before I knew anything was wrong. When I told him to leave, he stepped closer, eyes filled with anger I'd never seen before. For a second, I genuinely wondered what he might do, but Denise finally pulled him away and they drove off, gravel spitting under the tires. I stood there shaking, the fear finally catching up with me, because now I understood this wasn't just emotional betrayal. It was war over everything we'd built for 40 years. And that night, lying awake with every sound making me jump, one thought kept circling in my mind. If Tom had hidden money all this time, what else had he been hiding from me that I still didn't know about? After that night, sleep became something I barely remembered because every small sound in the house made my heart race, and lying there in the dark, staring at the ceiling, I kept replaying Tom's words over and over. You don't know where all the money is, sigh. That sentence crawled into my mind and refused to leave. By morning, fear had turned into determination. If he thought he could scare me into backing down, he'd misunderstood me completely. I called my lawyer as soon as her office opened, my voice calm but firm, and told her everything Tom had said about hidden money, secret accounts, and preparations he'd made long before disappearing. There was a pause on the line, then she said, Margaret, this changes things. We need to bring in a forensic accountant. I didn't even ask what that meant, I just said yes. At that point, I wanted the truth more than comfort. A few days later, I found myself sitting in a quiet office with two women across from me, my lawyer and an accountant named Sharon, soft-spoken, sharp-eyed, the kind of person who doesn't miss details. She explained how people hide money, how patterns appear if you know where to look, how lies leave trails. I listened, nodding slowly, feeling equal parts nervous and relieved. Nervous because I knew what we might find. Relieved because finally I wasn't alone in this anymore. Sharon asked for everything: bank statements, tax returns, investment records, credit card bills, anything from the past 2 years. Going through those papers felt like digging through memories that suddenly felt fake. Vacations I thought were normal, purchases I never questioned, little withdrawals that once seemed harmless. Sharon didn't react emotionally. She just circled numbers, highlighted lines, and quietly said things like, "That's interesting," which somehow scared me more than if she'd gasped. A week later, she called me. "Margaret, you were right," she said gently. "He's been moving money for at least 18 months. My stomach dropped. She explained how money labeled as home repairs never went to contractors, how transfers bounced between accounts in different states, how small withdrawals added up to shocking amounts. Jewelry purchases, hotel stays in Las Vegas, cash withdrawals timed perfectly around weekends he claimed to be golfing. Listening to it felt like discovering a second betrayal layered under the first. He hadn't just cheated on me emotionally, he'd stolen from our shared future while smiling at me across the dinner table. Ha ha ha, I shook my head, not because it was funny, but because the audacity was unbelievable. My lawyer laid everything out clearly: theft, financial fraud, forgery, enough evidence to ruin him in court if it went that far. For the first time, the power balance shifted. Tom wasn't the one holding secrets anymore. That night I sat alone at the kitchen table, stacks of papers spread around me, realizing something important: knowledge changes fear. I was still hurt, still angry, still grieving the life I thought I had, but I wasn't helpless. Not anymore. Tom tried calling again the next day. I didn't answer. Then he texted, softer this time, almost pathetic. "I just want this to end peacefully, peacefully, after everything." I forwarded the message to my lawyer and went back to reviewing documents. Silence had become my shield. A few days later, my lawyer told me Denise had hired her own attorney. Apparently, once she realized how deeply Tom had lied, she decided cooperation was her best option. I didn't feel satisfaction about that, just a tired acceptance. Everyone was scrambling now that the truth was surfacing. The deposition was scheduled soon, and the idea of sitting across from Tom again made my chest tighten, but I also felt ready, prepared, backed by facts instead of feelings. The night before the deposition, I barely slept. I kept imagining his face when he'd hear the evidence laid out calmly, professionally, without emotion. No shouting, no driveway drama, just truth. That morning, as I dressed carefully and looked at myself in the mirror, I barely recognized the woman staring back. She looked older somehow, but also stronger. I whispered to myself, "You can do this," then grabbed my bag and walked out the door. Sitting in that conference room later, with Tom across the table avoiding my eyes, I felt something strange, not hatred, not love, but distance. Like he was already a stranger. As questions began, his lawyer tried to deflect, downplay, explain away, but every time they spoke, my lawyer calmly slid another document across the table, another recording played, another lie exposed. I watched Tom shrink in his chair, his confidence draining with each fact presented. And in that moment, I realized something that made me exhale slowly, sigh. The trap wasn't something I'd set in anger. It was built piece by his own lies. He'd walked into it the moment he underestimated me. Before we go any further, let me pause here for a second. If you're listening and these real-life stories matter to you, if you've ever faced betrayal or watched someone rebuild themselves from the ground up, make sure you subscribe, because stories like this remind us we're not alone. And there are many more waiting to be told. As the deposition ended and everyone stood up, Tom finally looked at me, fear clear in his eyes. Not fear of losing me, fear of losing control. And while I didn't know exactly how this would end yet, one thing had become painfully clear. The man who thought he'd planned everything was now running out of moves, and the next chapter of this story was going to decide who walked away with their future intact and who didn't. Walking out of that conference room after the deposition, I expected to feel victorious, or at least relieved, but instead what I felt was something much quieter: exhaustion. The kind that settles deep in your bones after carrying stress for too long, and as I sat in my car before driving home, I just stared at the steering wheel and whispered, sigh, how did we get here? 42 years of marriage. Reduced to stacks of documents and recordings proving lies. But even though it hurt, I also knew something important had shifted. For the first time since Tom disappeared with my car, I wasn't reacting anymore. I was moving forward. A few days later, my lawyer called. Tom's legal team wanted to settle. Apparently, once the financial evidence was laid out, his confidence disappeared quickly. Hidden transfers, fake expenses, beneficiary changes, things that look clever in secret fall apart when exposed in daylight. My lawyer explained calmly that if we pushed this fully into court, Tom could face serious criminal consequences, not just divorce. Jail time was no longer impossible. Hearing that didn't make me happy. It just made me sad for the man he'd become. Still, consequences don't disappear just because they're uncomfortable. Negotiations began. Long calls, paperwork, numbers being discussed like pieces on a chessboard. I didn't attend most meetings. I trusted my lawyer, and honestly, I didn't want to see Tom more than necessary, but she kept me updated after every session. At first, Tom tried to argue, said assets should be split evenly, claimed misunderstandings, blamed stress, but every time the evidence shut those arguments down. Eventually, reality caught up with him. The settlement terms slowly took shape. I would keep the house. My retirement accounts would remain untouched. We'd split his accounts, but because of the money he'd secretly diverted, I would receive 60%. He'd cover my legal fees. And the Lexus, recovered from Denise's driveway by a private investigator, would be returned to me, fully serviced at his expense. In exchange, I wouldn't pursue criminal charges. When my lawyer told me, she asked, "Are you comfortable with that?" I thought about it for a long moment. Sending Tom to jail wouldn't heal me, it wouldn't erase what happened. What I wanted wasn't revenge, it was freedom, so I agreed. The final meeting took place quietly. Tom signed without speaking much. His hand shook as he wrote his name, and for a brief second I saw the man I'd once loved, older, smaller somehow, worn down by his own decisions. But sympathy didn't change reality. He'd made his choices. Papers were signed, lawyers shook hands, and just like that, the legal part of our marriage ended. Driving home that evening, I expected to feel something dramatic. Instead, the feeling was subtle but powerful, like setting down a heavy bag you didn't realize you'd been carrying. When the divorce was officially finalized weeks later, I didn't even attend court. My lawyer handled everything. Tom signed remotely from Nevada, where he'd decided to stay. The judge approved the settlement, and that was it. 42 years officially over with a signature. That evening, I walked through the house alone, but it didn't feel empty the way it had months earlier. It felt mine, truly mine, no tension, no waiting for someone else's mood, just quiet. I started making small changes almost immediately. Painted the bedroom walls a soft green instead of the beige Tom preferred. Bought new bedding, rearranged furniture, hung artwork I liked. Every change felt like reclaiming space piece by piece. The kitchen stayed the same, though. Funny enough, I'd always liked it, and after learning half the renovation money was secretly stolen from our joint funds, it somehow felt even more mine. Slowly, life began filling with new routines. I joined a book club, started watercolor classes at the community center, volunteered at the animal shelter on weekends. My children visited more often now that tension wasn't hanging in the air. My grandchildren actually enjoyed staying over again. One afternoon, Ellen looked at me across the patio table and said, "Mom, you seem lighter." I smiled, realizing she was right. "I am," she laughed and asked if I was dating. "Absolutely not," I said, laughing too. "I'm enjoying being alone." And I truly was. No arguments about what to watch on TV, no worrying about someone else's mood, just peace. 3 months after the divorce, mutual friends told me Tom and Denise had split. Apparently, once she learned the full truth, their relationship collapsed quickly. She even filed a lawsuit to recover the money he'd given her. Tom ended up in a small apartment, working part-time because his remaining retirement funds weren't enough. Hearing it didn't bring satisfaction, just closure. Choices have consequences, that's all. Meanwhile, my own life kept growing. I took my grandchildren to Disneyland, renovated the guest bathroom, improved the garden. Eventually, I sold the Lexus too. It carried too many complicated memories. Watching it drive away felt like closing another chapter. My quilting group even threw me a small celebration, champagne and laughter filling the room, and for the first time since everything started, I cried, but they were happy tears. And just when I thought life had finally settled into something calm and predictable again, something unexpected happened. I met someone who reminded me that even after heartbreak, life still has surprises waiting when you least expect them. And I had no idea that this next chapter would teach me one final lesson about moving on that I never saw coming. The funny thing about healing is that it doesn't arrive in one big moment where everything suddenly feels perfect again. Instead, it sneaks up quietly, one peaceful morning at a time, until one day you realize the pain isn't the first thing you think about anymore, and somewhere during those months after the divorce, life slowly started feeling like mine again. I filled my days with simple things that once seemed unimportant but now felt precious. Morning walks, coffee on the patio, quilting afternoons with friends, volunteering at the shelter where the dogs greeted me like I was the best person in the world every weekend. My grandchildren started calling my place their vacation house, running through rooms that once felt heavy with silence, and hearing their laughter echo through the hallway healed parts of me I didn't even know were broken. Ellen and David visited more often too, and without Tom's presence, conversations felt lighter. One afternoon, Ellen admitted, "Watching you go through this made me realize I deserved better in my own marriage." David told me he'd started working harder to co-parent peacefully with his ex-wife because he didn't want bitterness poisoning his children's lives. Hearing that made me proud in a quiet way. Something good had grown from something painful. Meanwhile, updates about Tom kept reaching me through mutual acquaintances, even when I didn't ask. Apparently, life in Nevada wasn't turning out how he imagined. Denise had kicked him out after discovering the full truth and successfully sued him to recover the money he'd given her. He moved into a small apartment, took a part-time job at a hardware store, and struggled financially. Later, I heard his health wasn't great either: stress, high blood pressure, even a minor heart scare. People sometimes looked at me with sympathy when telling me these things, as if expecting me to feel guilty or sad, but honestly, I mostly felt distant, not cruel, just finished. He'd chosen that path himself. One day, I ran into one of Tom's old golf buddies at the grocery store. Brian looked uncomfortable when he saw me. "Margaret," he said awkwardly, "I heard everything that happened. I'm sorry." I smiled politely. "Don't be." "I'm not," he admitted. Tom had lied to them too, claiming he was golfing with other friends while secretly spending weekends elsewhere. "I feel like an idiot," Brian muttered. I shrugged. He lied to everyone. Not just me. Walking away from that conversation, I realized something surprising. I wasn't angry anymore, just done. And with that emotional space cleared, new things began appearing in my life naturally. Around that time, I agreed to help organize finances for a women's shelter fundraiser. That's where I met Richard, a retired accountant volunteering there. He was kind, funny in a quiet way, and treated me like an equal instead of someone fragile. We started talking after meetings, then having coffee, laughing about small things. There was no rush, no pressure, just easy companionship. One afternoon he said, "You're really good at helping these organizations. Ever thought about doing this regularly?" I laughed. "At my age," he shrugged. "You dismantled a financial fraud in your own life. I think you can handle nonprofit bookkeeping." And somehow he was right. Soon I found myself consulting for small charities, helping them organize budgets and stay sustainable. I didn't need the money, it just felt good to use my brain again to contribute something meaningful. My grandchildren began jokingly calling me Grandma Boss, and honestly, I loved it. Life felt full again, not because of romance or revenge or drama, but because I was finally living for myself. About 6 months after the divorce, David visited Tom once and told me afterward that his father looked older, thinner, tired. He asked about you, David said carefully. My heart twitched slightly, but I simply nodded. What did you say? I told him you're doing well. That felt right, because I was. I'd forgiven him in the sense that anger no longer controlled me, but forgiveness didn't mean inviting him back into my life. Some bridges once burned stay burned for good reason. And just when I thought life had reached a comfortable rhythm, another unexpected moment arrived, something small but meaningful that made me realize how far I'd truly come since that morning I discovered my car was gone and my husband had vanished. Because soon the anniversary of that day would arrive, and instead of remembering betrayal, I was about to celebrate survival. And honestly, even I didn't expect how emotional that realization would make me. It's strange how dates that once brought pain can slowly transform into reminders of strength. And when the 1 year anniversary of the morning Tom disappeared with my car arrived, I woke up expecting to feel sadness, maybe anger, maybe regret. But instead, lying there in the quiet sunlight, I realized I felt something completely different: peace. A whole year had passed since I walked into that empty garage and discovered my life had changed overnight. Back then, I felt confused, abandoned, humiliated. But now, I felt proud of the woman who survived it. Instead of spending the day alone thinking about betrayal, I decided to do something different. I invited my children, my friends from quilting, and even a few neighbors over for dinner. Not to celebrate divorce, but to celebrate resilience. Survival, moving forward. We laughed, shared stories, drank wine, and Helen, sweet Helen, even brought a handmade quilt with new beginnings stitched across the corner. I cried again, but these were warm tears, the kind that come when you realize life didn't end the way you once feared it would. Later that night, after everyone left and the house was quiet again, I stood in the kitchen where this whole nightmare had started. I remembered standing there in shock, phone in my hand, wondering how everything fell apart so quickly. But the woman standing there now wasn't the same person. That woman had been scared. This woman knew she could handle whatever life threw at her. And funny enough, life still had surprises left. A few months after that anniversary, Richard and I grew closer. Nothing dramatic, nothing rushed, just two people enjoying each other's company. Coffee turned into dinners, dinners turned into small trips, and for the first time in decades, I experienced companionship without feeling responsible for someone else's happiness. There was freedom in that. He respected my independence, my space, my experiences. Maybe it would turn into love someday, maybe not. Either way, it felt good knowing connection didn't have to mean sacrifice. Meanwhile, updates about Tom faded into the background. Last I heard, he was still working small jobs, dealing with health issues, struggling financially. Once his brother emailed asking if I'd forgive Tom, reminding me of faith and family. I answered honestly, I'd forgiven him in my heart so anger wouldn't poison me anymore, but forgiveness didn't mean reconciliation. Some doors close for a reason, and life kept rewarding forward movement. I traveled more, helped nonprofits organize their finances, watched my grandchildren grow, adopted a golden retriever named Charlie who followed me everywhere and filled the house with energy again. The silence that once scared me became comforting. Freedom became addictive, and sometimes, late at night, I think about how easily things could have gone differently. I could have panicked. I could have begged Tom to come back. I could have ignored the lies to avoid starting over at my age, but choosing self-respect changed everything. So when people ask me what lesson I learned from all this, the answer is simple. It's never too late to stand up for yourself, not at 50, not at 60, not even at 70. Life doesn't end when someone walks away, sometimes that's when it finally begins. And if you're listening right now and going through something similar, let me tell you something honestly, you're stronger than you think. Even when everything feels like it's falling apart, you're capable of rebuilding, sometimes better than before. Before I finish, let me say this: if stories like mine remind you that hope still exists after heartbreak, make sure you subscribe and stay with us, because there are many more real stories waiting to be shared, stories about people who lost everything and still found a way forward. And now I want to ask you something. If you were in my place, what would you have done? Called the police immediately, forgiven him, or walked away like I did and built a new life? I'd really like to know. Because in the end, this wasn't just a story about a stolen car or a broken marriage. It was about choosing yourself when life forces you to make that choice. And honestly, looking back now, I can say one thing with certainty: the man who thought he'd escaped with everything actually gave me the greatest gift possible: my freedom.